Hello, friends. Welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today we have 3 brand new stories. Let's start with a warm-up story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Must comply with corporate. Okay. A little backstory. I work for a rental company, one you've probably seen online and in the news recently. I'll leave it at that. Edit. This is the second busiest branch in our location, second to the airport, over 600 cars just for our location. Previously, there were 4 other co-workers during my shift. For whatever reason, these co-workers either quit or were fired. Typically, to take off work, you write off on the calendar. That's it. My boss says we must comply with corporate by requesting off online, being approved by the HR department for our area. I took off a few days, complying with corporate, wrote it off on the calendar. No big deal, right? Wrong. Boss tells me I'm not to be writing my days off on the calendar by requesting through corporate, which I have been doing. I agree, trying to de-escalate my boss. Time goes by, a few weeks, maybe a month or 2. I have off for an event. Perfect. I get a call about 2 hours past my typical start time, boss seething with rage. B is boss, M is me. B, where are you? Do you know what time it is? M, I'm home. Today's my paid time off day. I requested it through corporate like you said. B, you didn't write it on the calendar. M, you told me to go through corporate, which I did. So you're leaving me with no service guys all day? Yeah, see you tomorrow. It's not my fault I'm the only service guy left. Oh well, maybe I won't be taken for granted. This was so sweet. I love stuff like this. Basically, the right hand biting the left hand, then going WTF. Hilarious seeing a company screwing over itself, and then being confused at the result. And our second story. Sure, I'll count every part for you. I work for an inventory company. We literally go to businesses, count their inventory, update their computer systems, and then my boss compiles a bunch of statistics about their inventory to discuss with management about how they're doing. Some of my boss's biggest business comes from buy-sells, or an inventory that's being done before the sale of a business in order to calculate the value of the current inventory, and therefore how much the buyer has to pay the seller for it. This can be complicated because what counts as a good piece of inventory changes depending on the agreement the 2 companies reach. We're usually brought in as a neutral third party. My boss has been doing this stuff for 40 years and has way too many stories of sellers trying to get him to inflate their inventory or buyers trying to get him to devalue it. So a few years ago, a client who will henceforth be known as buyer contacts my boss about doing an inventory for a business he wants to buy. My boss had worked for many years with buyer's father, who had recently retired and passed down the business to buyer. My boss doesn't think very highly of buyer, but he's not going to turn away business just because he thinks someone is an entitled idiot. My boss informs buyer that he will need to see the sale agreement at least a week before the inventory so he can review it. He's not a lawyer, but he has enough experience with these things that he can parse through the language on his own, and if there's something weird, the week gives him enough time to get an actual lawyer to look over the agreement or speak to the buyer or seller to go over things. Buyer agrees to send it as soon as the lawyers finish fleshing it out. He doesn't. For the next 3 months, my boss is all but begging buyer to send him the sale agreement. Buyer apparently has the attention span of a 3-year-old learning trigonometry because he agrees every time, and then a thing came up and he forgot. He was even desperate enough to contact the seller to try to get the details, but the seller refused to even take the calls. The day before the inventory, my boss finally calls buyer and says that if he doesn't have the agreement before 10 p.m. that night, he was going to cancel the inventory. Buyer finally faxes the agreement over so my boss can get a handle on what exactly the buyer has agreed to buy from the seller. So, by the time the date of the inventory arrives, my boss is starting the day severely annoyed because he'd been up all night going over the sale agreement. Side note. Because my boss is a effing wonderful human, he often meets a group of us so we can carpool to the jobs together, which meant I had a front row seat to the horror that was my boss's welcome by buyer the day of the inventory. Buyer, hey boss, thanks for coming out today. I really appreciate it. Boss, Well, it's what you're paying me for. Hey, before we get started with everything, I wanted to talk to you and the seller about the sale agreement. I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page before we get started. Buyer. Oh, no need. We got it all figured out. Boss. I'm sorry? Buyer. Well, the seller's really hurting financially and he has to take care of his sick father and his family, so I'm just going to buy the whole inventory. Boss. You're just going to buy everything? Buyer. Yeah, that should make it simpler for you, right? You can just do the inventory like normal. Boss. Okay, you realize that you don't need to do that, right? Your agreement states that you only have to pay him for inventory that is below a certain age and in good condition. Buyer. That's not a big deal if there's a few bad pieces here and there. It'll be a lot faster if you guys just count everything. Boss. I need to make sure you understand. Just from the casual look around I've had so far, I can tell you that a good portion of what I'm seeing is outdated and in some cases completely destroyed. You won't be able to sell them. Buyer. Well, I've taken a good look around too, and I think you're exaggerating. Besides, whatever I can't sell here, I can always post up on eBay. There's always somebody who wants this old stuff, so I want you to count everything. Boss. I understand that, and if you tell me you want me to count everything, that's what we'll do. But I really think that, look, I'm still going to pay you the same. So what the hell do you care what I buy? You may know inventory, but you can't see the big picture here. I want everything counted and added to the inventory. It's not like you guys have to work any harder. Boss. Okay. Then we're going to need to reword our contract. The current one specifies that we're doing the inventory according to the sales agreement you've reached. If you want us to count everything, then I said I wanted everything counted. I'm not paying a lawyer for you to change one line of a contract. Why are you making such a big deal out of something like this? Just count the stuff. Now, as previously said, my boss has been doing this job for over 40 years, and he'd already walked in pretty annoyed by Buyer. And Buyer has now been jerking around with the sales agreement for months, forcing my boss to do a week's worth of planning in one night. And now, not only did he want to completely ignore all my boss had put in, but the Buyer also did it with a ridiculous amount of snark and attitude while my boss was trying to make sure Buyer didn't end up paying for junk. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. My boss gives the Buyer his giant customer service smile, which has always scarily reminded me of the Grinch, and says, "All right then, you want us to count everything? We'll count everything." And then he came back to our crew and announced, "Everyone, choose a section. We're counting everything. Broken piece, counted. A piece with a handwritten or ripped up part number, counted. A kit with pieces missing, counted. Pieces so old that they've become obsolete, counted. We counted each and every piece in the business, no matter what the condition of the part." A couple months later, one of the crew asked my boss about what happened, and he burst out laughing. The Buyer finally figured it out after about a month of nonsense and hearing his employees gripe about 30% of the inventory he bought was simply garbage for a total of approximately $500,000 US. My boss lost him as a client. He regrets absolutely nothing. Edit. Sorry if this was confusing. I guess you can consider inventory an industry term. Inventory is both a noun and a verb in this story. Inventory, noun, the actual products that are being sold. See also stock. Doing inventory, verb, the process of counting and recording the stock of a business. So we were doing inventory, counting and recording of their inventory. In this particular case, they sold car parts. And our last story. Fire me, will you? A few years back, I left one bar job for another. The new employers seemed like it would be more of a suitable fit for me, with better wages, more consistent hours, etc. Within the first week, I noticed some odd things going on, but I never questioned it and acted oblivious to it. It wasn't until my first paycheck came in, I was taken to the side and told they would lodge the hours I worked if I liked, or they could pay me cash. They told me the benefits of taking cash, and I was really interested as I wanted to further my education, and being unemployed would help me gain entry into certain third-level schools. So I agreed, and they had me. At this point, I should mention that this was in Ireland, and the third-level school I wished to attend was FAS at the time. Within a week of getting my paycheck, they asked me to run their more advanced operation. This involved a certain clientele that every day from 3 to 5 p.m. would come in, order refreshments, and watch horses run around in circles. Every now and then, they would write down on a piece of paper horse, stadium, time of race, and amount of money to be placed on the horse and pass it to the bartender, which would be me. I would then have to call a UK-based number, 13 digits, and give a code for the bar, 5 digits, and all the details the customers gave me. Cash paid by customers was put in a hidden spot and also used to pay the customers' winnings. Then the pot was given to the UK company at the end of the month. Fast forward a few months, and one of my coworkers took a disliking to me. My own fault, really, as I never stood up for myself, so I was an easy target for getting blamed for mess-ups. And as anyone who knows how stressful the service industry can be, there's always one employee who wants to blame another for everything going wrong. Anyway, one day my shift was canceled with only an hour's notice. I was told I would be given the shift the following day and a phone call would confirm the time, but this didn't happen. A few days later, I messaged the manager and asked her for the schedule, and she never replied. I called the establishment but never got an answer, then received my final paycheck by mail. There was nothing I could really do, as I was never in the book, so I just had to accept it, which I did, as I was/am always an excellent worker. Anyway, one day back in school, and me and a few people were talking about how we remember the phone numbers of our first mobile phone, and it dawned on me, I remembered the phone number for the gambling company in the UK, and I also remembered the code for the bar. Excitedly, I ran home from school and switched on the TV and went to the racing channel. I picked horses that I liked the odds of not winning. Then, over the course of about a week, I made several large bets using all the bar's code. All of the horses lost. And it wouldn't be until the end of the month that the bar would find out that they have a very large debt to pay for which they have no understanding why. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.